Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for everyone here, Sister Robin, and those that would like to be here. So we're going to be covering John 18. But first, I wanted to get an understanding because Christ is about to be betrayed into the hand of enemies. We know that we have the synoptic gospel, that's Matthew, Luke, and Mark, and they give an account that is similar, but it's an area where we're going to go in John that is going to get off a little bit. And to bring understanding to that, I just wanted to read what was going on. I'm just going to read one account that's in Matthew's to get an understanding of the events that happened. And then we're going to go to John 18 to get an understanding in light of what was going on. So that's why I'm in Matthew 26. Okay. First, we're going to look at from Matthew 26, 2-5. I'll go ahead and read unless you would like to. Ye know that after, pardon?
No, go ahead, you're fine.
Okay. Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Hold on to that crucified, and this is Christ saying that it's 2 days before the feast of Passover. And he also pre-announced, and we will see this later in John, that he would be betrayed and to be crucified. Okay, keep that in mind because we're going to touch on that later. And it says, then assembled together the chief priests and scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. So this was a couple of days before the Passover, and he was to be betrayed and crucified. So now here's the chief priests and everybody, and the scribes and the elders, which would be the Sanhedrin. They went, now this was 2 days before, they went unto the palace, and they went to Caiaphas' place, which was the high priest at the time, and we're going to talk about him a little bit too, and consulted that they might take Yahushua by subtlety and kill him. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Now, this was just to bring out, this is what the elders wanted to do. The high priest and the elders, they wanted to kill him. This subtlety, which I wanted to bring, is outside of the Roman government. Now, if they would have killed Yahushua, they could have stoned just like they did Stephen. They were doing killing, because you're going to see them in John say that they're not allowed to kill, but killing was going on. It just wasn't under the Roman rule. So they were under Roman rule, so they didn't have the right to do corporal punishment, which we talked about, but it was going on in subtlety. That's what meant. They would stone somebody, nobody would challenge them, and not even the Roman government cared unless it was a Roman citizen that was being killed. So they were getting away with murder, to say. So if they thought you were in heresy, they could stone you to death, which was in the law in the Old Testament, but that's when we was ruling ourselves. When we were under the rule of another government, then we were subject to that government. So they really had no authority under the law to execute. We understand that. Okay, we're going to go on to Matthew's 6 and 7. It say, now when Yahushua was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box, very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. Not going to get into that, but we see that Yahushua was in Bethany, and I mentioned that it was very close to the Mount of Olives at this time, and this was leading up to his death. So remember the woman that had the alabaster box, and she poured ointment on him, and at this time, Judas was upset because he saw the value of what he had poured out. So we're seeing where this is leading to Judas' action. We'll go to Matthew 26, 14, and 16, skipping. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests and said unto them, what will ye give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. We had talked about this. So Judas was upset, and he went to the chief priests and covenanted with them. He got an agreement with them to turn over Yahushua. Are we getting that? So he was going to betray Christ. And from this point, he sought opportunity to betray him. So we mentioned that because Judas is going to do something when we get to John, and I want you to remember this. So he sought opportunity. Now, he had already went to the chief priest. Let's go to 18 to 21, and I'm going to read that. And this is only for understanding. So when we hit 18, we can have an idea of the events that took place leading up to this. 18, and he said, go into the city to such a man and say unto him that the master said, my time is yet at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with thy disciple. Continue. And the disciples did as Yahushua had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. And remember, we were 2 days before the Passover at first, so time has expired, and I'm going to try to fill in some of these events when we get to John. Now, when evening was come, he sat down with the 12, and as they did eat, he said, verily, I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. So at this point, we're going to have a betrayal. Now they sat down to eat. So this whole time is transpiring. Okay. So we had went from 2 days before the Passover, and now here we are right up on the Passover meal. My granddaughter is asking for some cookies. Okay. Get them in. She's getting some cookies, sorry. Now I'm going to continue. We're going to go from 22 to 25. And it say, and they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? So they were wondering who would betray him. Since we talked about he sat down with the 12 and they did eat. At what time was their eating? This become important when he sat down with all of this, and you will see the similarity where they sat down, and there's going to be a time where Christ is going to expose who it is that would betray him. Any questions? Okay. So it said, and they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? And he answered and said, he that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him. But woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. So it's about to be revealed who would betray him. And then it said, then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? And he said unto him, thou hast said. So at this point, Judas is identified as who would betray Yahushua. That's going to be important. Now, where are they at this time?
Priest Terry, can you back up to verse 23?
Okay.
Where it says, he that dippeth his hands with me in the dish. What is he saying there?
Okay. Now, at this point, they were eating of the Passover. It had transpired to the point they were eating at the Passover. So the Passover meal, so he had bread. And so it said now this was unleavened bread, he that dippeth his hand with me in the dish at the same time, because he was saying, Christ had openly said that one of them would betray him.
Right.
You see that? We had got to the time, at one time we was 2 days from the Passover. Now we're up to it. See, and we don't get that. So here they are having the meal and the Passover meal, and they're sitting there eating. And so he had told them that night that someone is going to betray him,
right.
One of his disciples. And so all start asking, is it I? Now, Peter was on his bosom. Is it me? Am I going to betray you? Now, remember, he knowing all things. So there is Peter being on his bosom, as if it's him. So he told Peter, hey, watch, who dipped their bread at the same time, sopped their bread with me, which we talk, that's who's going to betray me.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So where were we? And let me see if I got that. 23. He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, meaning when it says the Son of Man, that's Christ. He goes to the cross because of his disciples that betrayed him. He's the cause of him going to the cross. This is what's going to lead to Christ going to the cross. But it said, woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Because he did that, woe unto him. It would have been good if he had not been born. That's going to be the ultimate faith of Judas. Then Judas, now we already had the disciple, and then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, Judas asked the question, is it I? And he said unto him, thou hast said. In other words, you know, yes, it is. And we could, yeah, it's you. Thou said. We got that? So Judas is identified. Judas know it. And then you have Peter, he knows it, that Judas is going to betray. So let's see what happened after this in 26. And it said, as they were eating, Yahushua took bread and blessed it. This is what I want to catch in John. Now here, they were having the Passover supper, but we're getting the different points of view from different disciples. John is revealing a little more than what we're going to get from Matthew, Luke, and Mark. So right here, we have the tendency to go ahead and read forward as if Judas was still there. Now, what we're about to come on in 26 is the communion. And what I'm going to submit now and show you later is that Judas didn't take that communion. He was eating the Passover supper before he got to this part, but we're going to see where Judas immediately left after he sopped the bread. Okay, and we'll see that in John. So without John, what you do is you read this and you say, okay, it's starting at 26, and as they were eating, you think Judas is included. Yahushua took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. Remember, we do that according to scripture. So you're thinking that Judas is there right now. And what we're going to show later is, because we're going to come back to this part, Judas wasn't there. Okay, because this is saying that you in agreement that Christ is going to break his body, that he's given us the ordinance of communion, and Judas is not in agreement. We're going to show that Judas, and this becomes important because we're agreeing to his body being broken for us and who he is, and we're in communion with the Father. This is how important communion is. And it said those that take of that unworthily, that many be dead because of this. Now Judas, at this point, we would think that Judas went on and took the communion, and it says, and as they were eating, Yahushua took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it. This is where I get the all of it. For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sin. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. Okay. He had instituted that of the communion. Then they sung a hymn and went into the Mount of Olives. This is basically where we're going to pick it up. Now, if you look at Mark 14, 1 through 27, same story, like we were saying. If you look at Luke 22, 1 through 39, same story. Okay. So we see here what had happened up into the point where Christ was about to be betrayed and crucified. We see Judas being identified. Now in 30, we see here, if I go on to 30 and say, when they had sung a hymn, they went out unto the Mount of Olives. So after they took communion, they sung a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. We see that. And what I was saying, Judas did not take the communion, and that's what I'm going to show in John. He left to betray Christ so that he was not with them in the garden. What we're going to show here is when they went out the Mount of Olives, we're going to show by John where the Mount of Olives is and where they went after this hymn. And we know that Judas was not with them. Judas came with soldiers and everything. So Judas has left, and this is the part that's being left out. So let's go to John 1. Now, getting an understanding of what was going on in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It says, starting from verse 1. 18:1. When Yahushua had spoken these words, remember where we left off with priest Quam, that Yahushua had given a prayer. He was praying for those disciples that was with him and that would be left in the world because he was going to be crucified. And it said, when Yahushua spoke these words, he went forth with his disciples over to the brook Cedron, where was a garden, into the which he entered and his disciples. Now I want to talk about that because we left off that they sung a hymn and then they went to the Mount of Olives. Guess where the brook of Cedron is? And we're going to take a look at that. Cedron, we're going to take a look at this map so we can get an understanding. This is the Mount of Olives right here. This is where they took off to, but look is what here. This is the garden. I don't know how you can see this. This is the Garden of Gethsemane right here, right there. In the brook of Cedron was in this valley right here. This is east of Jerusalem. So they went over here. This would be considered Garden of Gethsemane is of the Mount Olives. Are we seeing that? All of this is this whole mountain, this region right here, this is the Kidron Valley. This will be considered the Mount of Olives. But on the Mount of Olives, you still got different towns, like Bethany was there, which they left. Bethany would be considered of the Mount of Olives. That's like you living in Atlanta, you like living in Georgia, and then there's Atlanta and there's other areas, but it's all Atlanta, you know. So this is just like, this is all of Jerusalem, but you got different towns and cities, different parts. So here, we have the Garden of Gethsemane at the foot of the Mount of Olives right here. So are we seeing that? Any question? Now see, also Jerusalem, this is the Kidron Valley. You see this shadow here? Kidron is what it means is the Kidron Valley, a dark, shady valley, because shade, if you got a mountain there, depending on where the sun is, it will make this seem dark. So you got a mount here, it's going to cast a shadow. And then if the sun is over here, it's going to cast a shadow right here. So what Kidron Valley means is dark and shadow. Okay. So this Kidron Valley is in between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. And this is the Garden of Gethsemane right here. Any questions? Do we see where we at? Don't be ashamed. It's just you, and I'm just trying to show where they were, because people don't may not catch it and say he went forth his disciples over the brook of Cedron. So remember that valley, so they crossed over that brook where was a garden. It didn't tell you that was Gethsemane, but that's what's after that brook. If you know that, you know he went into the Garden of Gethsemane, unto which he entered and his disciples. Are you seeing that? Okay, so there is the garden. We know he crossed over the Cedron brook. Now this word they're using Cedron, but it's also the word was used Kidron, because this is the Kidron Valley, and some refer to it as the Kidron Brook or the Brook of Kidron. So I'm going to continue on forth. We looked at the map. Did you need to see the map, Priest, or did you catch the map?
Con, I saw it, Priest.
Okay. All right. So there was a garden, and you don't see the name here in John, but we know we're referring to the Garden of Gethsemane by the other stories. We know that he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay. Verse 2, can you read for me, priest, or no?
Con, I can read.
Okay, verse 2.
And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place. For Yahushua oft times resorted thither with his disciples.
Okay, just want to talk about that a little. Judas knew the place, which suggests it was a place that, now remember, the crowds and everything was flogging Christ. It was very little rest. This was a place where they could get solace, retreat from the crowds. So it was a place that they often came, according to scripture. It was a garden is a peaceful place, and where that region wasn't in the city, but it was a restful place. He went there to pray. That's where the blood like grapes came, blood came down like grape drops. So here, why did Judas know of this? Because he was numbered among them. Now, we already showed that Judas, which we didn't see at that Passover dinner, that we're going to show that he left. So he left to go to the priest so he could betray him. So it said Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Yahushua oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Are we seeing that? Let's go to verse 3.
Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons.
Okay, what we need to see here, a band of men. The Greek word for this is spira. This is an ancient Roman military unit. A lot of times when we look at bands, we don't have, we don't get the totality of what was going on here. Now, a band of men in that military unit comprised of 300 to 600 extremely well-trained soldiers with the finest repertory. Now you're starting to see who set out for Christ. When you think a band of men, a lot of times we're thinking, and this is going to become important when you see what happens to these band of men. It was 300 to 600 men came for Yahushua. Are we seeing that? The chief priests and Pharisees, they were in submission and cooperation with the Roman leadership. Now, according to our customs, is that something that the Hebrews would do, turn their people over to another nation? It becomes important that we see this. So here is our leaders and our elders in cahoots with the Roman government, or using the Roman government as a sick dog, someone that they're gonna sick on our people. That's something that we didn't do as people. We didn't turn our people over, turn to another government to handle our affairs. And you're gonna see this come back in John to smack the elders in their face when they're asked, you know, you should be handling this matter. Okay, but here they saw to get the Roman government involved. And so there was 300 to 600 well-trained Roman soldiers. Now, also, they came out at night, which we know with lanterns and torches. This was a witch hunt. Only the most vicious and violent of criminals was pursued at night. We would wait till the next day. You run them that, let's say, right in your face. We're going to proceed there, and at night was a time of non-pursuit. But it's a witch hunt when you come out with lanterns and lamps that they had, which suggests something else, how they perceive Yahushua, that they will come at night. Okay. Now, let's go on to verse 4. Verse 4.
Yahushua therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, whom seek ye?
Okay. Christ knew what was about to happen. He knew who they were seeking. He wasn't surprised by this. So this questioning was not a questioning of inquiring that he did not know, but you would see it was a questioning for them to stand up and respond to who it was that they were there for. Now, let's see what happened. Verse 5.
Then answered him Yahushua of Nazareth. They answered him, Yahushua of Nazareth. Yahushua said unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with him.
We want to talk about this. Now, Christ made it clear who he was, that he was who they were seeking. And he said, I am he. Now, the interesting thing in this verse is that Judas was there. Remember, he came into this God, which betrayed him. He stood with who?
He stood with them.
He stood with them. He stood with the enemy. So here, this is why it becomes important. I was saying, and we're going to show this, that Judas did not take of that communion. He left quickly because Yahushua, you're only going to see this in John. When he knew what he was doing, he said, go and do what you do quickly. And it said he immediately left. And see, and if you just read the Mark, Matthew, and Luke, the synoptic gospels, that you're not going to see that. You're just going to read straight through and think that Judas was there when he break bread and told them with that stuff. But you can see in John where he got up and left. Are we seeing that now? We ain't got to the part of the proof yet, but we're going to get there. I'm just trying to shine some light on it because we're going to get there and you're going to be able to see this. So Judas was standing with them. And what is communion? Fellowship, where we stand with each other. But Judas had no fellowship. At that point, he had chose who he was standing with in this communion, and this oneness wasn't with Christ. Are we catching that? He stood with the enemies, though he walked with Christ for 3.5 years. And this becomes the precedent of betrayal.
God.
Are we
Choose
seeing
this day who you shall serve.
Right. So he stood with the enemy. Okay, we're going to keep on going. Let's go to 6 and see what happened.
Soon then as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground.
Okay. This becomes important because remember, we're talking about 300 to 600 men. All fell backwards. This backwards was a divine, him demonstrating divine power and majesty. And they had to all fall prostrate to them. This is 300 to 600 men. Are you grasping that? If you thinking that this band was a couple of people fell backwards, this is 300 to 600 men. Are you grasping?
For one man.
For one man, when he said, I am he. Now, there is the result of that. We're going to lead up to, they are slow about putting hands on him. Okay? Till he makes it clear that it's Okay, they didn't put hands on him. You're going to see where they grabbed his disciples. And he has to make it clear, I am he. Would you want to put your hands on the person when he said, I am he? That there was a factor working of fear here. Want to put your hands on that person when you can't comprehend what caused you to fall back onto the ground. This wasn't a little thing. Now we're talking about 300 to 600 men. And what I'm trying to do is grasp the power that must have been involved in the majesty and what was being conveyed at that time, that 300 to 600 men would fall back onto the ground. Are you seeing? Are you catching? That had to be divine majesty. And in other words, bowing when he said, I am he. Oh, you could go someplace with that. I am he.
Priest,
Yeah.
just wanted to add real quick, just to add more power to that, to where you were just suggesting, and recall the lesson that I had given speaking in this book of the Gospel of John. There are many I am statements. And what's interesting here, anywhere in the text where you see a word in italicized, it is a word that has been inserted by the translators. So in theory, and what you're saying, it was presumed that he said, I am he. But if you take away the he that has been italicized, it said, I am.
Come on.
Which that would make it even more profound if he said, I am, and they fell to the ground.
Con. Excellent. Now you saw the I am going back, same thing to like he going back to the Old Testament, who I am is. And I wish I caught the I am. I didn't even look to see that was italicized. So thank you. But that becomes powerful, and they fell to the ground. Can't miss that. Are we grasping that? Let's go to verse 7.
Then answered he them again, whom seek ye? And they said, Yahushua of Nazareth. Yahushua answered, I have told you that I am. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way.
Okay. Now here in verse 7, Yahushua again, because no man laid hands on him, but they held his disciples, like we were saying. So you look in verse 8, and Yahushua answered and told them that I am, as we said, we're going to leave the he out. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way. Now, can you see why they grabbed his disciples instead of him? This force that caused them to fall back to the ground with him saying, I am. They grabbed his disciple. Are you catching that? Not him. They didn't lay a hand on him because he said he'd lay down his life and no man takes it. And you can see that. And then also that when he told Pilate that if this was my kingdom, I would fight for it. And you can see the very majesty in that no man could have took his life unless he laid it down. Are we grasping that? He slung 300 to 600 men down like it was nothing, just with a word. They knew. So they didn't grab him. They grabbed his disciples, who they thought they could get away with. I'm telling you, fear rose up in them. And we miss that sometimes. We miss what happened there till we look a little deeper. Okay. So here's Yahweh Shine verse 8. I told you that I am he. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way. And we see that Christ was redirecting them from his disciples back to him because he would pay the price himself alone. Are we seeing that? Okay, 9.
That the saying might be fulfilled, which he spake, of them which thou gavest me have I lost none.
Let's take a look at John 10, 11 to 18.
John chapter 10, verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep.
This is the thing. He's the good shepherd. He giveth his life for the sheep. Can you imagine a coward in that situation that could have got away and put it on his sheep? One that's not a good shepherd, or could have fled in the midst of them, afraid to put hands on them, but grabbing other people, those that will allow someone to take the blame for them or do the penalty for a crime that they have done. But he said, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. Continue.
But he that is a hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep.
Just as we're saying. Now here is Christ likening this situation, because a hireling means that there are pastors and those that they're not for the sheep. Okay. But in this situation, a hireling, him that is there for benefit, not necessarily for the love of the sheep, which he's going to explain that he loved the sheep. But if you there for pay or benefit, see, you will scatter. You don't have the love of the sheep. And it said, and not the shepherd who own the sheep are not. See if the wolf coming, which is them, and leaveth the sheep and flee, and the wolf catcheth them and scatter the sheep. So what the wolf would do to the sheep is devour them. And he would be a monster, but here's the good shepherd. He's going to stand up and be responsible for what he came. 13.
The hireling fleeth, because he is a hireling, and careth not for the sheep.
Don't care for the sheep. Now, 14.
I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As
15.
the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep.
I lay down my life for the sheep. He didn't allow them to be lost for that cause, that he alone was going to bear the cost and the burdens. He did not allow them, the military, to devour them, to take them. Are we seeing that? Let's continue. Continue. Next verse.
And sorry, I was on mute. Verse 16. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice. And there shall be one fold and one shepherd.
Speaking of the lighter time when others would come in, the Gentiles going to come in, they're going to also be able to hear his voice. And us of this time would be able to hear his voice, and we're going to all be one fold. He's going to bring us and draw us unto himself and unto the Father. We're going to be one, many members, one body, one spirit. 17.
Therefore doeth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again.
So he's going to lay down his life. In other words, he's going to lose his life, but he's going to bring it back. 18.
No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father.
Okay, so here we go. No man takes his life. No man, and he demonstrated that in the beginning by them all falling back with his power that you don't take. That's why they were apprehensive about laying hands on him, even though it was him. He was standing up boldly saying, I am. I'm who you're looking for. And he was the only one speaking it, but they lay hands on everybody except him. Oh, he's seeing that. And then he says he has the power to lay it down, and he has power to bring it back again. And he said, this is of the Father. This commandment he received of the Father. So he's bending to the will of the Father, even in this, that this is his perfect will, that he will lay it down. Are we seeing that? Let's go back to 10. So we were at 9 where he said, okay, go ahead at 9. Did we read 9?
We read 9.
Okay. And he said that none would be lost. Okay, let's go to 10.
Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus.
Okay. He smote the high priest servant. I want to make that clear that he smote the high priest servant and cut off his ear. And the servant name was Malchus. Why is that important? That Peter, what we did not say that he smoked one of those Roman soldiers. And that's why I specified, because if he would have struck with a sword, a Roman soldier, and it was 300 to 600 dead, what would have been the consequences?
Well, he'd have been dead.
Right.
Immediately.
Immediately. See, so it's important to catch that. And they say high priest, but a lot of times we jump over that. Oh, he knew who he was putting his hands on. He didn't smoke one of those Roman soldiers. He smote one of the high priest servants. That's why it become important. So Peter knew what he was doing. And let's look at this Malchus. That was what it says, it was a Semitic name, that Malchus, in that he held a trusted position in the household of the high priest. And this was probably, they say, Caiaphas. Now, we're going to talk about this, and we've talked about it before, that Caiaphas was appointed by the Roman Empire, whereas there also was Annas, which was one of the priests, but the Roman, and this is why, how many high priests, according to our customs, did they have at one time?
You only had one high priest, right?
One high
Right.
priest.
Right. There was one high priest, but you're going to see two here, because we talked about this too. Annas was the one that was the high priest, and Caiaphas was his son-in-law, which the Roman government placed in position for political reasons over Annas, but the people still recognize him as the priest. So here you had both of them stand in the priest's palace. So when he goes to Annas first, don't think that they're traveling some distance. It was enough room in there. They didn't take him out of there, but according to our custom, you were high priest till you died. So we didn't have two high priests, but there was some orchestrating. We was talking about they were in submission and cooperation with the Roman Empire to allow. Here is the involvement we have laws here against church in state. Here is the state of the government getting involved, orchestrating those things of which was considered the Most High or religious matters, because they appointed Caiaphas. Are we seeing that? So
Con.
here, let's go on to 11. Any questions first of all? Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question now.
Go ahead.
With them appointing, they appointed someone within the Israelite sect, correct?
Yeah, because remember how they even put people over when the Roman Empire came, and they put governors and stuff over the people. It was the Roman Empire that chose those. So doing these dealings and everything, we had talked about that one time before when it's not fresh on me, I got it in my notes somewhere, how they got around to appointing Caiaphas, but they would have rather, just like political policy today. Now, if you got someone and while they got lobbyists, who's gonna stand by you or work in your interests, you want that person, and that person more acceptable to work in your interests. And for political reasons, they saw, even though Caiaphas was the son-in-law of Annas, they politically was advantageous for him to be in that position than Annas.
Con.
Okay. Where were we?
We're at verse 11.
Okay, go ahead.
Then said Yahushua unto Peter, put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it?
Okay, now here we have Christ is submitting, like we said, to the Father's will, but he's saying some things here that will let people know that he's not willing to fight at this point. He's not willing to draw the sword, because he has told Peter, here is someone that had demonstrated a willingness to fight. Are you seeing that? He took out his sword and he cut the ear off of his chosen target of Malchus, but he was being observed in his response. He told him to put it up. So they knew he wasn't ready to fight with all this power and authority that he had. And what he did, he didn't show a will to fight. And he would even tell Pilate later, if this was of his kingdom, he would fought for it. But he wasn't willing to fight, because here was a perfect place where he could have broke out and fought if he was trying to save his life. But he submitted to the will of the Father. And he said, this cup which my Father has given me, shall I not drink it? In other words, he is going to submit unto the Father's will. No matter how bitter of cup, he's going to drink it. He's going to submit to it. And this ain't the place for fighting. I'm not ready to fight. Are we seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Then, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and it's interesting that Peter, going back to setting that stage, 300, granted he didn't touch it wasn't Romans he didn't touch, these are all Israelites, but that he was willing to fight and show boldness with 300 to 600 men there. But then later on, he shows his cowardness in the same chapter.
Con, I say it's interesting because it may be suggestive to that some cowardice there, because like you say, he selected who that had to be selected. He selected who here. Now remember, this was a servant. This wasn't a military soldier with the weaponry.
Right.
He didn't have the weapon. He was there as a servant of the high priest to observe.
Gone. Good point.
So he gonna take. I'm gonna. It's just like
He
bully.
gonna attack the least.
Right. Like a bully looking for the
Looking at the
smallest
little
guy.
kid. Let me go pick on the little kid over
Right.
here and show my
Right.
toughness.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So here he was there as a observer. So he could go back and say, yep, we got him. A servant. When you had soldiers there armed with the latest weaponry of today, with an arsenal of 300 to 600 men, he didn't touch them.
God.
So that may have been indicative, an early indication of where Peter's heart was. You know,
Right.
yeah. I want to show
I
the
want to
Messiah.
appear. I want to appear tough, but
Yeah, I want to appear
I'm
tough.
really tough.
Let me hit this man nobody cares about. You know, nobody's gonna do anything about. I'm gonna take his ear. You know,
God.
so you know this fruit for thought. You know,
Absolutely. All right, verse 12. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Yahushua and bound him.
so then after they seen that Christ wasn't willing, and after they seen that he was going to be peaceable, are you seeing that? It is a then the band, that's the 300 to 600 men, the captains and officers of the Jews took Yahushua and bound him, but still they bound him. Are we seeing that? This was after that he had told them, put up your swords. After he healed, they also seen him heal Malchus, and then stated that he's willing to drink from that cup. Then they bound him. 300 to 600 men bound him and took him. Are we getting the picture?
I mean, the one thing just to point out to that real quick, as you mentioned, they came at night. You know, this is the time when they go after the most vicious of criminals. And yet we're talking one man, and they knew that he had, you know, a few followers with him, but the sheer fact that they brought 300 to 600 men,
Right.
this one man,
It's crazy.
right? So the fear was there,
Right.
even when they sent them.
Didn't they have, I mean, it was like overkill to the hilt, you know?
Yeah. Same. I was thinking the same thing. You know, like I say, we reference Peter in his position, but again, the Roman soldiers, and we were talking about Roman soldiers. We talking
Right.
about well-trained machine in a sense. You know,
Right.
these brothers wasn't no joke. You know, they didn't conquer, they ain't wrong for a reason. The only reason why they are wrong is due to that military. So, like you said, so that spoke a lot about the Messiah and the power that they knew that they had, and pretty much I was thinking they probably was praying that it didn't it didn't manifest where it's going to wipe them out, because again, if you know the Messiah was doing all these miracles, they knew. We can't forget man, I forget his name, when he went to the Messiah and asked him to, you know, heal his daughter or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, we can't forget what, you know, so those things, the same thing that them Israelites were hearing at the moment, they were hearing too.
Right. Now think about it also. Who got the Roman soldiers to go? This is what we're talking about, the relationship with the Roman Empire and that of the high priest. Now, remember, they were getting reports of what Christ was doing, all the healings. Can you imagine them saying, what's going to happen if we attack him this way? You know, what will happen? What other power and authority? Because they seen these things. Remember, he came to manifest those things of the Father. So can you imagine them saying, you know, maybe they were thinking that's not overkill. Say, maybe we got a Samson here, or maybe he gonna come out with something we ain't seen before. And there was a display of it when they all fell backwards. But imagine them high priests, they knew they were dealing with a divinity, man. They already said who could do this, some of them, lest he's sent from the Most High. They knew of these miracles, they knew of this, and so they sought to kill him, and they wanted to do it through the Roman government. And with what they knew, was it overkill? I mean, that's a question. What was it actually overkill with what they had seen thus far, and sent their spies and all these priests out, the scribes and lawmakers, and approaching him with what they see? You got to think, was it overkill? If they didn't know what they would get.
God.
Good question.
Okay, interesting. Let's go on to
Verse
13.
13. And led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest the same year.
Okay, now we talked about what happened there. You had Annas was the high priest, and most of the people still recognize him as high priest because Caiaphas was appointed, we talked about, by the Roman Empire. And we talked about how long was it that wouldn't exist. You were high priest until you died. That's what ended your office. Okay. So you see the politics that were played there to get it, but it is like the people was submitted to Annas, and then they put somebody in place. So people going to continue to recognize. It was kind of like, you remember the Temptations, the first set, you know, when they broke up, and people was recognizing two groups as the Temptations when they should have been, because some people like Eddie Kendricks and I think it was Eddie Kendricks and Ruffin, they were together, and then you had the rest of the, who was it?
Yeah, Dennis Edwards.
Yeah. And you had them, and so you had two groups out there, and people, it was hard for people to choose. And I remember when they came to Hampton, and people were saying, well, I want to see this group. I want to see the group with Eddie Kendricks, and other people were saying they wanted to see the other group, but no one disclaimed either of the groups because they had original and founding members as not being the Temptation. They were like, is a fake group. You know, they were both recognized as the Temptations because of the commitment of people.
God. Y'all brothers showing y'all age with that Temptation reference.
Hey, man. That was good music.
That was
Okay.
good. That was the music was good back then.
Yeah.
All right. So where we at? We're
14.
at verse 14. Now, Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people.
Okay. What are we talking about there? Let's take a look at John 11:45 to 53. Let me go to John 11. Let me see if that's it. We can start at 45 and we'll go to 53 to get an understanding of what happened there.
John chapter 11, verse 45. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Yahushua did believed on him. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Yahushua had done. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles.
See, we see that they know that miracles and all this stuff was coming from Yahushua, and that's why the 300 to 600 men, you know, so they didn't know, they knew miracles was going forth. Continue.
Verse 48, if we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation.
Now, do you see the political play here where they were receiving of the Romans' hands? Are we seeing that? That it was a benefit for high priest Caiaphas that he was getting something. Are we seeing that? He was working hand in hand with the Roman government because there was benefits. We talked about the hireling. The hireling is there for benefits, whereas the good shepherd stands there and he protects the sheep, and he died instead of the sheep. Are we seeing that story come together? Go ahead.
Verse
49.
49. And one of them named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, Ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. And
Let me-
this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahushua should die for that nation.
Okay, so here that was the desire, getting that understanding that they had already, this was preconceived by them, but in line with prophecy, you know, that Yahushua should die for the nation. Okay, continue.
Verse 52. And not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of the Most High that were scattered abroad. That from that day forth they took counsel together for to put him to death.
Okay, so we got a little insight. This is what they want, and we see this coming together of them devising to counsel to get Yahushua put to death. And I mean, there are Old Testament scripts also that how they took counsel against him that we could go to, but that's not the point that I'm trying to make right now. So we're going to go back and push on. Any questions? Okay, let's go to 15.
And Simon Peter followed Yahushua, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Yahushua into the palace of the high priest.
Yeah, this is after they took Yahushua. So it said another disciple. Who do you think that was?
Judas.
The Judas?
Absolutely. See, because Judas, and no, it said Simon Peter followed. So we know that Peter followed, you know, who denied Yahushua 3 times. And they say, so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest. We know that Judas already went to the high priest. You remember he made a covenant with them.
Mhm.
So now you're starting to see the picture, and it say, and went in with Yahushua into the palace of the high priest. Why did he go into the palace?
You talking about Peter?
Oh, that other, it's
Judas.
another disciple.
To collect that money.
Absolutely.
He got to get his way.
That brother wanted to get paid. You know, he had done his
I
job.
delivered.
He delivered, yeah. So there he is in there, Judas. We know he already had that relationship going on because he had already deceived, and we know where he got. We saw when the Satan had entered in, he was mad about the alabaster box, that money that he kept the bag. He was mad about that 300 pence. And then he went out and it said from that time forward, he sought opportunity to betray him, and he made a covenant. So here he has fulfilled that, and he wants the bag.
That bag.
Want that bag. Any question? Judas made the deal. Let's go on to 16.
But Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter.
Okay. So Peter stood at the door without. And this is without. They were at the high priest palace. So he stood outside, and look who comes along,
Mhm.
Judas. He goes to the woman at the door. You let him in. He see him there. He knew Judas. Are you seeing that?
God.
Con. I want to add something.
Go ahead.
The palace. Now, whose palace?
Now,
Whose palace?
remember, they took him to the high priest palace. So he's at where Annas and Caiaphas resides.
Right. So it's a
He's not
palace.
at the governor's palace yet, or the
Right.
governor's house. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's with our people now.
He with our people.
He with
and
our people.
and our people got a palace.
Yeah,
The
this
high
is the high priest. See, this
priest always
is
got a
what we're
palace,
talking
didn't
about. We're talking about
Yeah.
the benefits. Remember, they didn't want to give that. If these are the benefits, so you had governor's palace. These are things that was being bestowed. See, you
That's
you
the
see
point.
here, this was the comforts, the creature comforts. Now,
Mhm.
this place was big enough where Annas had his sector of this. It was big enough, and Caiaphas, they could reside in the same place. But these were the matters, and the Sanhedrin could come and meet there and everything. So our high priest, look at this, just like they do with the Pope and some of these religious symbols, how the people give unto him. So it was beneficiary for them to be in that position.
And that's the part I'm trying to bring out, the palace,
Right.
for him.
And Christ was a threat to that. You remember what they said, say, hey, all the people, if they believe in him, we're going to lose. And see,
We're
so
gonna
they
lose
were
our
getting,
cushy position.
supplements or something from the Roman Empire, just like the churches do today. They get supplements. 501c3, that don't speak on gay issues, don't do this. The government, it got their hand in it.
God. Exactly.
Right.
Leading the sheep astray.
Right.
You got a pastor there that really don't have no connections with no one other than the people around him that running the business.
Right. So they had palace. Right. Con, any more questions? Y'all still there?
God.
Okay.
I just let you, I just want to finish that. I just want to bring that out. That's all.
Oh, okay. So what verse we at?
Verse 17.
Verse 17. Okay.
Then saith the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He
Okay.
said, I am not.
Okay. This was the first in our people of Peter. How would this damsel know to ask the question, art thou also one of this man's disciples? How would she know?
Judas was in her ear. We were
Right.
already there.
Judas came in her ear, say he one of us. You go right there. So Judas let her know. And that's why she came up with the question. She didn't personally know this guy or had any experience. He said, and then saith the damsel that kept the door, because Judas went to her.
Because Peter
All
was
right.
chilling outside. He's like, I'm gonna take a look from
Right.
the car. I'm not trying to be seen.
Right.
I'm gonna be like away.
Right. And
Judas
what
like,
would
"Nah,
you
wanna
do?
go talk to
And
that
what
guy
would you
right
do?
there? He's
Right.
with him. Go get him.
Right. Right. And what would you do? You were in a group or something like that, and you there, and somebody, you like, same thing. If we're here and somebody's we got a feast and some of Banyala's folk are there, you can say, hey, I know them from House of Wisdom. Yeah, he one of them. I was in feast with, folk talk.
Right.
So Judas went over. Yeah, he was one of us. And so she inquired and asked the question. Okay. Next verse.
Verse 18. And the servants and officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself.
Okay, what we want to get into the servants. Now, here again, we're talking about the high priest had servants. They had household servants. Remember, Malchus, he was a servant of a high priest. Are you seeing the benefits? So, and these officers that are referred to here, these weren't the military officers. They did their job and delivered him. These were the officers of the temple, which was also under the high priest. They served the temple. So now they've been, he was put in the hands of the soldiers came to get him. Then he was put in the hands of the authority of the high priest. Are you seeing it? So we're not talking about the Roman soldiers went out there trying to warm themselves for no Jew, you know, in there being having questions. They're gonna deal with him when he comes to the governor mansion. They did their job, dropping them off. Caiaphas got in there and say, well, hey, got in the governor's ear and say, hey, we may need some help getting this one. Get me a band of soldiers. Are you seeing what's going, the workings that's going on here? But now they delivered him. And so you had the servants and the officers, more perks, more benefits of the high priest. Okay, 19.
The high priest then asked Yahushua of his disciples and of his doctrine.
Now here, the high priest is asking, do you think that the high priest had knowledge, sending people to witness, sending people to spy out, to witness what was going on with Christ at every corner? We're reading about these scribes and Pharisees that were sent from the, do you think, first of all, that they knew what was going on?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So it said the high priest then asked Yahushua of his disciples, which they were aware, and of his doctrine, which they were aware. They already knew he was converting people, that they were believing on it. He was doing miracles and everything. Okay. So let's continue 20.
Yahushua answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whether the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing.
There he is. He did all of this openly. They seen, and then he came unto our people. So he was in the synagogue. He was in the temples. He was confronting them on every hand. So they knew what was up. So Christ go ahead and respond in 21. And he says,
Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said.
right. Now, who was sending these out? They were coming from the Sanhedrin. They were coming from the high priest, the spout. They knew what was going on. So Christ is just turned the situation around. It's not a mystery. You know, you sent them. You sent them to. They've been reporting on me all this time. That's why y'all want to put me to death. They knew what was going on. The scribes, the lawyers, the Pharisees confronting him all through his walk. You know, so he like, ask them. You send them. We see that you send them out to spy on me. You send them out to give you a report. Ask them. You know they told you. So do you see how ridiculous that question? He's looking at it. They're asking him when he knows. He knows all things. You know, you sent them. You know. You know my doctrine. You know the disciples that's with me. You've been trailing me ever since I began. You know. So it's kind of rhetorical or antagonizing that he would ask that question. Let's continue.
Verse 22. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Yahushua with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so?
Okay, now here, that's why I made it clear about who the officers was, the officer of the high priest and of the temple that served the temple. A Roman soldier would care if he not responded to, he cares about what the Roman governor said. Them officers of the temple that served the temple, you just disrespected the high priest, and that's where he smacked them. And you got to have that understanding, because the Roman officer wouldn't have cared what he said, you know. So he was an officer of the temple that served the temple and under the high priest. And that's why I was bringing that out, that those were not Roman soldier officers there. They done their job. Okay. Now, that was verse.
That's verse 23. Yahushua answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me?
Okay. And this was appeal also to the consciousness of the wretched. He's like, I've done no wrong. They have at this point, there has been no accusation. They're trying to judge the situation and condemn him, and they're wanting to Roman subject. And here is this man so offended, they had to appeal to his wretched conscience that he had done no, he wasn't convicted of anything, yet him being a Jew, Christ being a Jew, and he just smacks him. That shows the hatred and the wretchedness, you know, sometimes of our people against each other. He had done no wrong. He is simply understanding that they had said, it was a rhetorical question, because they had sent all these spies out and all these people to trail him the whole time. And he said, just ask them. And then now this man is going to hit him because he's feeling some kind of retort. You see the environment, and he is one of the servants of the high priest. So what is a trickle down effect. It starts at the top. There was this animus coming from the high priest all the way down, trickling to his followers. You know, he just wanted to lay hands on him with all this animus, but for what? What was it? And that was showing some of the animosity here, but Christ appealed to him for why? For what? For what reason? What wrong have I done? Not for what you feel. And a lot of times people are doing things for what they're feeling inside. Remember, there was a lot of animosity there, and not for what you've done. So the man couldn't put his finger on anything that Christ done, but he had this hatred for them. Many times are we like that in the world? You know, we build up this animal. What have I done? You put your hands on me. Are we seeing that? He had done no wrong, but this man was wretched. Let's go on to 24.
Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas, the high priest.
Okay, now this is not saying that now that he gone to Caiaphas, we also we read that he first went to Ananias, because we had Caiaphas doing some inquisitioning and everything here. But the point is that since the Romans got him in bound, he's been bound ever since he first was captured. He was bound when the Romans got him, they bound him. And then when he was at Ananias, he was bound. And when he went to Caiaphas, he's bound. Christ was bound this whole time. Are we seeing that? Okay. He was still bound. Okay. Now, Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas, the high priest. So he has been bound all this time, and he was speaking to Caiaphas. Let's go on. 25.
And Simon Peter stood and warned himself. They said therefore unto him, art not thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not.
This is the second denial. And it says Simon Peter stood. Now he's not at the door. Now he's warming himself. And they said, therefore unto him, art thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. That was the second denial. And we'll see where this comes from, the next verse. Go ahead to 26.
One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, said, did not I see thee in the garden with him?
Now, you know, if someone lays a hand on one of your kinfolks with this kind of trauma, you would take notice who had done it. And see, so here was the first woman didn't know. It was told to her in the ear by Judas who he was, but now here was someone that was a witness that was there, and you just cut off the ear of my cousin or my brother or my uncle. You know, he's going to take notice of who put hands on his family. So here his kinsman. So here it says a kinsman to Malchus. So, you know, this brother most surely knew who he was talking to. And what did Peter say? He ain't know him. Let's go on.
Verse 27. Peter then denied.
We're at 26 or 27? 27? Okay, go ahead.
Peter then denied again, and immediately the cock crew.
So it was prophesied, we can see by the other gospels, that when Peter said he would give his life, and Christ told him that he would deny him thrice before the cock crew twice. And there is the fulfilling of that prophecy, which we get from the other gospels. Go on to 28.
Then led they Yahushua from Caiaphas into the hall of judgment.
Okay, we want to say that because I mentioned that he was with Caiaphas. Okay, because you see now Annas sent him. That was just given the backstory of he was still bound. And we see that he was leaving Caiaphas, that he wasn't with Annas at this point. He was with Caiaphas, as stated. Now, go ahead.
Where was I? Sorry. This
28.
28. Then led they Yahushua from Caiaphas into the hall of judgment. And it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover.
Okay, now this hall of judgment, now they had went from Caiaphas' palace, now they're over to the governor's palace, which where Pilate was. Now you're going from Jew to Gentile, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. What is meant by this from a Hebraic? What is meant here from a Hebraic perspective? Why? Go ahead.
Yeah, with the Gentile.
Uh-huh.
That it.
Go ahead, brother.
Go ahead.
Yeah, again, this is so that they would not be unclean during the Passover, because if you were unclean, you wouldn't be able to partake of the Passover. You could take it in, you can redo it in the second month, but you would have to not partake in the Passover if you were defiled.
Absolutely. And the thing about it, going over from the Hebrews to the Gentiles, remember, sometimes they call it the Feast of Passover, sometime of unleavened bread. They were supposed to have all leaven out of their houses. Now, going over to Pilate's place, they had no such rule. So it was leaven there in their houses, and this would have defiled them for unleavened bread. They were supposed to get all the leaven out. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy 16 and 4 to that note. Deuteronomy 16 and 4.
And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coasts 7 days. Neither shall there anything of the flesh, which thou sacrificest the first day at even, remain all night until the morning.
Okay. And it was just that the leaven that they didn't have that custom of removing. They were Gentiles and would have been defiled with leaven, so they didn't want to go into that house with or into that building, because they had no such belief in leaven was in there. And had they went into that house with leaven, they would have considered themselves defiled and unable to take of the Passover. Are we seeing that? Okay, let's go back.
Real quick, priest.
Go ahead.
Back, not to take away from the lesson, but all praise has been good. Is just going back to this, just even to the beginning of 18, understanding this. My thoughts on this has always been, and again, I don't think we see this entire time, even going back to the band of men and officers, I always thought those were Israelites. It's not until they transfer them to Pilate that the Romans get involved.
Well, it said, that's why we said begin with that the high priest sought the Romans. We covered that earlier. I don't know if you was in. He sought them to get a band of men to take over. So that band of men came from.
Okay, I may have missed that part.
Yeah,
I
you missed
I
that
just
part.
was always because
Right.
because
No, he did.
Judas went to Israel, and that's who he made that. When he made that agreement, was not with Rome, it was with the leaders,
right, of Israel. But that was the thing.
Wow.
See, that's why they didn't want to. We touched on that before, that they and I'll go back, see if I can go back to that note where it was. But that was the thing that he sought. The high priest got the bands from, in order a band was also, like we said, it was a Roman military unit. It wasn't considered a Hebrew. It was like a Roman Empire militia, what they were called, just like a legion. We weren't called legion. Okay, that was even if we had thousands, 6,000, but that was also what was being used by the Roman to affiliate their numbers in order. And we adhere to that. Later, we talk about like a legion of angels. We talked about a legion, understanding what that now is, based on it. But all that's in Roman phraseology. And so and this was, like I say, the coercion or the cahoots that the priesthood, the high priesthood, was in bed with the Roman Empire. And that's why it was easy for them to get what they wanted from them, as far as to get them in. And remember also, which is going to demonstrate, they did not want to kill Yahushua. They wanted to put him to an openly shame. They could have stoned him like they did Stephen. They tried to throw him off but remember, they wanted Roman, in order to fulfill prophecy, they wanted him to be crucified. We talked about that in the beginning too, that Christ prophesied to be crucified. Crucifixion could only take place by the Roman Empire. We didn't crucify people. So it was through the government, and that's why they had got them involved. So crucifixion only took place under the Roman Empire.
Con,
We could have stoned, you know.
Con, let me elaborate further. I wasn't referring to the band of men. I'm referring to the officers.
Okay.
Officers, because you made a reference that the officers, these were not the same officers, but all the officers were, they could have very well been those officers, because the officers were of the IOD. Because it says, if you go back to verse 3, it says,
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The
Yeah.
officers, we were talking about, they were officers of the temple. That's what I explained, that the officers mentioned there, it says servants and officers were officers of the temple. And then we defined that that was the officer that struck him when he was disrespectful, when he felt that he was disrespectful to the high priest. And I said the Roman officer wouldn't have been offended in that way.
Right,
So
right. And they wouldn't have struck a Roman officer.
Right.
Con. Okay, got you.
Okay. Any other question?
I kind of missed that. Okay, so what you brothers talking? What we're saying here?
Oh, no, it's all good. You came on late. I was just referencing the office. There was the band. The band was the military militia group of Rome.
Right.
And so you see this exchange happening where you see Rome's involvement and then you don't, and then you see it again. I was just trying to add some clarity there, that the Romans were part of that 300 to 600 that was there to get him. But then you saw a period where it was just Israel, and that's in the point where we're seeing now, where the Israelites refused to go in because they were entering into the palace of Pilate, whereas Priest Terry brought up, they had leaven, and this was a period that was sacred to Israel to not be defiled with leaven and all other matters of uncleanness, so they can partake in the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So just making it there's, so.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Where were we?
We're on verse 28. No, 29.
29. Okay. Okay, 29. Go ahead.
Pilate then went out unto them and said, what accusation bring ye against this man?
Okay, so Pilate went out and said, because they try to turn it over to Pilate, and so what's the charge? Why is he here? And then what Pilate say after that?
Verse 30, they answered and said unto him, if he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee.
What an answer is that? What has he done? If he was not a malefactor, matter of fact, if he wasn't guilty, he wouldn't be here. That's the premise many times in our system today. People say, oh, well, he's in jail, so he done some wrong. Yeah, he's guilty. And that's a problem with it. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So they just go ahead, instead of answering the question, he wouldn't be here if he wasn't a malefactor. So vague. What has he done? Continue.
31. Then said Pilate unto them, take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, it is not lawful for us to put any man to death.
Okay, so this is what we were saying, what they wanted to do with crucifixion. They wanted to use the government to do their dirty work, to put him to an open shame. He would have been out before the people, would have been nobody coming along, no Roman soldiers coming along saying what thou doest, or they stoned him. Remember, the prophecy was that he would be crucified, and the only person that could deliver that crucifixion was through the Roman government in that empire.
God. But
go ahead.
Just to add something real quick though, verse 31, they said it is not lawful for us to put any man to death. But
right.
Is that true according
to
the law?
Right? They see, and that's the other part, like I said, they stoned Stephen, like they couldn't do it that way, but they put plenty to death. We sit there and testify that they've killed the prophets. They've been the murders of them. And we saw that they sought to kill before they came up with this scheme. They sought to kill Christ. Remember, they wanted to throw him over a cliff, and he walked out the midst of them. So it was in their heart, and we've been seeing this whole time where they wanted to kill him. But remember, Christ had a following. Now, if they would have been successful, let's just say if they would have been successful in killing him, number one, they would have looked at him as a martyr. This was one of the things when these minds got together. They're like, hey, we're going to make him a martyr, and he's going to become, because that was one thing they accused. Maybe they took him out. They were afraid when Christ died, when they couldn't locate his body, that he would become a bigger of a threat. Now, had they killed him and just put him away, secretly stoned him someplace, and he went away, his fame would have been just the martyrdom of that would have grown. They didn't want any of that. They wanted to put him to an open shame, have him, the government have him condemned, and everything die out, and openly around where the feast was, all the Jews said, we're going to put this thing to bed. We're going to put it to bed in front of everybody. And even Caiaphas prophesied, not knowing that he would die for the people, and they chose him, and for the nation, for those that was to come, that he would die for the whole world. And this is what happened. But it was prophesied that he would be crucified, and had they had killed him, that wouldn't have matched up with prophecy. And also they feared that this was about the safe way to get their dirty work done, have him killed, and then have his fame, everything be put to bed, have him go down as a malefactor, So they were trying to be smart when they were actually fulfilling the prophecy of Scripture.
God, I guess the other thing I was trying to bring out here, and you don't read it here in this gospel, what I was trying to draw out here is what, according to the law, how can you put one to death? And there has to be witnesses, 2 or more witnesses. And we don't read it here in this gospel, but over in Matthew 26, we read when they brought him to the palace, that they were looking for those who would bear witness the charges against Yahushua. And it said that that there was none, but then they found 2 witnesses. So this is what you don't read here, is that interchange that took place to then that's what sent them over to Pilate.
Right.
God.
Right. And their witness conflicted,
Yeah.
So, okay, now we'll see in 32.
That the saying of Yahushua might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die.
What death? The kind of death, like we were talking about the prophecy. Let's take a look at John 3:14. So this becomes important. Let me see here, 3:14. This is John 3:14. What does that say?
And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up.
So he was supposed to be lifted up, which was done through crucifixion. So he was to be crucified and lifted up. Are we seeing that? So if he would have been stoned or any of those other things that they tried earlier, which didn't work, that wouldn't have fit prophecy, what we were saying. So we'll go ahead and sum this up. 33.
Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Yahushua, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews?
So Pilate entered the judgment hall again, and this is him asking Yahushua, is he the king of the Jews? 34.
Yahushua answered him, saying, sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me?
Okay, now him being a Gentile, where would he get that from other than it was told of him for him to come out, are you the king of the Jews? So his fame was abroad. Even Pontius Pilate have heard of his fame. Continue, 35.
Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done?
Pilate still trying. This was a deflection. Am I a Jew? But he got that Christ knew where he got it from. It was from his fame. It was known abroad. Okay, even among some Gentiles, we see the stories where Gentiles and even those in the military, they had servant was healed, like Priest Quam mentioned, the daughter being healed, and so his fame was well known. And of course he heard it, because he didn't get out of nowhere, out of thin air, are you the king of the Jews? He had heard some things. Now he said, he deflected and said, thy own nation and chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Still trying to find out what Christ has done and the betrayal of his own people. 36.
Yahushua answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence.
Okay, and we saw and talked about this verse itself when he demonstrated his divine power in that those soldiers fell back 300 to 600 men just with a single word, and he's reclaiming that if his kingdom was of this world, then he would fight for it. Therefore, he did not fight. 37.
Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? Yahushua answered, thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice.
So what is going on, this dialogue between Yahushua and Pilate at this point? Does it seem as if Christ is introducing to Pilate the reason that he had come? Remember, Pilate later, we're not gonna get it. That's he said that he almost was this a Pilate that he almost persuaded him. Was that Pontius? So
that's a good question.
yeah, so here the dialogue that's taking place with Pilate's inquiry of who he was, and here is Yahushua explaining that he is the truth. He's talking about his kingdom, and that he was born for this cause and would bear witness unto the truth. So he's speaking to the heart of even Pontius Pilate at this point. Everyone that is of truth, and we know who he is. He's the truth, he's the way, he's the life. Hear my voice. We already discussed those scriptures in which if you hear his voice, and that he came from the Father, that if you you're in agreement with not only Christ, but the Most High. If you hear not his voice, and then you're none of his. So here he is speaking some truths here to Pilate, and this truth Pilate is not really getting it. So in 38, he says what?
Pilate saith unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all.
So in his inquiry unto Christ, he found no fault in him. And then Christ got into his conscience as to what is truth. And still he's battling and grappling. I believe in that dialogue that Christ had even touched him, that spirit that's in every man, the light of every man, began to touch him, even as those soldiers didn't want to put hands on him, knowing that something sacred, something significant was happening there. And he came out, I find no fault in him. And not just that, at all. Nothing. Zero.
God.
39.
But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews?
Okay. Now, mind you that Pontius is holding on to that King of the Jews because it's something that he's convicted with inside. There was nothing, like he said, he asked Christ, am I a Jew? But he had heard some things. And this is why he's stuck to that you're a king. And he's like, where is your kingdom from? And remember, he said, and Christ told him, you said that I'm a king. He got that from someplace. But again, Pilate's appeal to allow Christ to go through, he said, you have a custom, like we said, and that was to release someone. He still, that he didn't want to make this decision to condemn an innocent man. And he was going to put it in their hands. That's why he could say, I wash my hands of this, that I have nothing to do with this innocent man's blood, and what did we say? Let his blood be on us and our children. Because I submit that he was speaking to the heart of the matter. And even in this, things that Pilate did not understand, and even in his heart of heart, he was being touched. And he knew not to touch certain things or want to be responsible. These were grimace men, harsh men. But here, when you look at Pilate was a Roman government, just like when you go in that courtroom, they have no issue with adding days on days of sentencing is what they do. And it seemed like they have no heart, but when the Most High get involved and you see a judge grapple with a decision, when there's you can see the intervention of the Most High. When I was explaining to you that judge making the decision, on my son, how she grappled and for no reason at all, and how she was like, I'm gonna do this because the spirit worked on her heart. Is something there that makes you not okay with what's going on. And Pontius wasn't okay with it. 40, let's sum it up.
Then cried they all again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
So here was, not only was Barabbas a robber, we talked about this before, but he was in a sect that was rebellious, that there was killings also involved. So it says he was a robber. And what we had studied in other areas, the sect that he was in, and he was, this group was violent, and they were fighting also for the freedom to be free from Roman rule. So the people would have loved Barabbas, those that was oppressed by the government, but they knew he was wretched. But they found solace in that his battle was with the liberation of Israel from Roman rule. And they cried to allow Barabbas to go away, knowing that he was, I'm just giving the other side, that he was a thief and probably a murderer, most likely a murderer as well. And that's where we end this lesson at 40. I didn't want to get into what happens after that, because that will be Priest Aubrey's lesson. But we're open for questions now or adaptations. It may be something, like I say, we don't hit it all. We try to hit some meat and we leave meat on the table.
All praise, all praise. Good lesson, brother. Good lesson.
Good lesson.
Okay. Any questions? If not, I'm gonna stop the recording. Okay.